Question number 29, Fiskerton. The following is an extract from the statement of financial position of Fiskerton, a publicly limited entity, as at 30th of September 18. ये उन्होंने कुछ दिया हुआ है फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट का उन्होंने एक एक्सट्रैक्ट दिया हुआ है. The bank loan has a covenant attached whereby it will become immediately repayable should the gearing ratio, that is long-term debt to equity of Fiskerton, exceed 50%. Fiskerton has a negative cash balance as at 30th of September 18. चलो. Discuss how Halam property should have been accounted for and explain the implications of the financial statements and debt covenants of Fiskerton. Okay. तो सबसे पहले तो डेट कोवेनेंट्स यानी कि अपने को गियरिंग रेशियो मेंटेन करना है, राइट. तो लॉन्ग टर्म डेट अपॉन इक्विटी. तो फॉर दैट थिंग अपन क्या करेंगे, ये जो 50,000 है वो, और अपना इक्विटी का बैलेंस कितना है वो सबका सब 50% से नीचे होना चाहिए. तो वो फिलहाल के लिए देखते हैं कितना है. 7253 प्लस 20151 प्लस 10,000 तो वो बनता है 1,04,004. तो 50,000 डिवाइड बाय 1,04,004 इज इक्वल टू 49.79. तो अपन चालू तो हर एक चीज ऐसे करेंगे कि इन द करंट सिनेरियो फिस्कर्टन कंपनी इज प्लेइंग एट द एज, दैट इज दे हैव अ गियरिंग रेशियो ऑफ जस्ट बिलो 5%, हैविंग 49.80%. They are current their any transaction slightly also in covered by debt would increase their gearing and would breach their covenant, thus making it immediately repayable, and thus on putting further pressure on the cash balances. फिर आते हैं अपन अभी हलाम प्रॉपर्टी के ऊपर. इन द करंट सिनेरियो वी कैन सी, अभी यहाँ से इंक्लूड विद इन द नॉन करंट एसेट्स ऑफ फिस्कर्टन इज अ प्रॉपर्टी इन हलाम which has been leased to Idingly under a 40-year lease. The property was acquired for 20 million on 1st of October 17 and was immediately leased to Idingly. Asset was expected to have a useful life of 40 years at the date of acquisition and have a minimal residual value. Fiskerton has classified the building as an investment property and adopted the fair value model. ठीक है. The property was initially revalued to 22 million on 31st of March 18. मेरा ईयर एंड क्या पहले वो देखने दो. सितंबर 18 है, ठीक है. मैंने रिवैल्यू किया 22 मिलियन पे. इंटरिम फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स हैड इंडिकेटेड दैट गियरिंग वाज 51% प्रायर टू दिस रिवैल्यूएशन. ओके. द मैनेजमेंट, ओके ओके, उन्होंने रिवैल्यूएशन किया ताकि उनका वो बेस बढ़ जाए इक्विटी का. रिवैल्यूएशन सरप्लस से वो चीज अदर कंपोनेंट्स ऑफ इक्विटी में जाए. इसके लिए the managing director was made aware of the breach of the covenant and so instructed that the property should be revalued. अच्छा, तो एक मिनट, जो उन्होंने ऊपर दिया है 30th of September 18, ये हमें उन्होंने ईयर एंड का दिया है. We cannot say that they're playing on the edge from the beginning because this is of the year end. तो अपन ऐसा बोल सकते हैं कि at the year end it was just below 50%, thus indicating that there can be certain transactions which they have manipulated, Fiskerton have manipulated in order to bring down the gearing ratio. Now in the current scenario, and then we will start from here. The managing director was made aware of the breach of the covenant and so instructed that the property should be revalued. The property is now carried at a value of 28 million, which was determined by the sale of the similar sized property on 30th of September 18. This property was located in a much more prosperous area and built with a higher grade of material. An independent professional valuer has estimated the value to be no more than 22 million. The managing director has argued that fair value should be referenced to an active market and is refusing to adjust the financial statements, even though he knows it is contrary to the international accounting standards. So, देखो, according to IFRS 13 fair value measurement, a fair value is the value which can be received for selling an asset or transferring a liability in an orderly transaction between market participants, right? तो In order to determine the fair value, there are three approaches: market-based approach, income-based approach, and cost-based approach. In the current scenario, market-based approach has been taken into consideration. Now, when market-based approach is taken into consideration, then level one, uh, then level one should be taken as the base, because that provides us the most reliable information, which is identical products or identical assets at in an active market at quoted prices. In the current scenario, however, the comparison between its own property and the another property which was sold at 28 million is not a fair valuation, because this property was located in a much more prosperous area and built with high grade of material. Thus the managing director's argument that the fair value should be referenced to an active market is an invalid argument, because the active market for his own property, which is 22 million property, has a different market. मतलब has a different active market that is inside his or her, मतलब inside that property's area, like inside that area. अभी यहाँ पर कैसा है, the property which was sold was located in a much more prosperous area, and that's why the valuation was 28 million. This same valuation will not be for the property which Halam company, sorry, which Fisker company owns in Halam. ठीक है ना, ये बोल देंगे. We can also say that this property valuation from 22 million to 28 million was done under pressure in order to increase the gearing, and thus this is an treatment of the invalid treatment of the value revaluation, or is manipulating the financial statements so as to not breach the covenants. We are manipulating the financial statements so as to not breach the covenant, thus not putting pressure, so as to not put pressure on the cash balances. ये अपन बता देंगे, चेक कर लेते हैं. Fiskerton. Accounting treatment. According to IFRS 16 leases, lease is the finance lease. This is because the lease term is equal to a useful life and its residual value is deemed to be minimal. As such, the fair value should not be held as an investment property, but instead de-recognized. The fair value gain of 8 million will be reversed. ये देखो, जैसा उन्होंने बोला 8 million. Actually, उन्होंने IFRS 16 के बारे को भी consider किया है, but we didn't consider that. As far as the Fiskerton should record a lease receivable equal to the net investment in the lease. Note that the fair value gains were incorrectly calculated, since adjustment should have been made from for the differences between Halam building and the one sold due to different location and quality of the materials between the two buildings. Actually मैंने जो बोला ना वो भी सही है. हाँ, ये देखो इन्होंने ये चीज ट्यूटोरियल नोट में कवर की है. देखो IFRS 13 fair value measurement says that fair value is the price received blah blah blah. It's all on transaction. When deciding a sales or purchase price, participants would factor in the condition and location of an asset and any restrictions on its use. A more accurate reflection of the fair value would have been 22 million. तो अगर अपन ये IFRS 13 को भी इसके अंदर डालते हैं ना, कोई कोई ऐसी दिक्कत वाली बात नहीं है, क्योंकि इन्होंने ये चीज को ट्यूटोरियल नोट में एक्सप्लेन किया है, बस इतना ही है. ऊपर उन्होंने क्या बोला है कि IFRS 16 leases, these are finance lease. This is because lease term is equal to the useful life of the residual value deemed to be minimal. As such, the property should not be held as an investment property. तो ये अपन ने लीज पे दी हुई थी. अच्छा, अगर ये अपन ने लीज पे दी हुई है तो इसको अपन इन्वेस्टमेंट प्रॉपर्टी नहीं बोल सकते, और इसको फेयर वैल्यू पे मेजर नहीं कर सकते. तो ये पॉइंट इन्होंने इस पैराग्राफ में से उठाया है. वी फोकस्ड ऑन द लास्ट पैराग्राफ, बट व्हाट दे हैव सेड कि अगर ये प्रॉपर्टी लीज पे दी हुई थी तो फिर ये IFRS 16 के हिसाब से अकाउंट होनी चाहिए थी, रादर देन अकाउंटिंग इट एट क्या बोलते हैं, IAS 40. ठीक है. The incorrect treatment has enabled the Fiskerton to remain with its debt covenant gearing as per the financial extracts is 49.8%, जो इन्होंने कैलकुलेट किया होता. अब जब अपन ये 8 मिलियन के गेन को वापस एक बार ऐड करेंगे तो देखो क्या होगा. द गियरिंग वुड इंक्रीज तो सब्सिक्वेंटली बिकम 54.1%. तो ये 54.1% बन जाएगा, क्योंकि अपन ने रिवैल्यूएशन सरप्लस में डाला हुआ होगा. अभी जब अपन इस चीज को निकाल देंगे तो फिर वो चीज डिनोमिनेटर से हट जाएगी, इट विल बी 54.1 million. Furthermore, the retained earning would be further reduced by correcting the rental receipts. This presumably have been included in the profit or loss rather than deducted from the net investment in the lease. This would be part be offset by interest income, which should be recorded in profit or loss at the effective rate of interest. After correcting for these errors, Fiskerton would be breach of the debt covenants. ये भी अपन ने बोला हुआ है. The negative cash balance would appear likely to be repay the loan बराबर. Serious consideration should therefore be given as to whether Fiskerton is a going concern or not. तो मतलब से going concern के ऊपर सवाल उठ सकते हैं, ऐसा मैंने बोला है. If it is determined that Fiskerton is not a going concern, then non-current assets and non-current liabilities should be reclassified to करंट एंड रिकॉर्डेड एज रियलाइजेबल वैल्यूज. तो अगर ये गोइंग कंसर्न नहीं है तो उसको रिक्लासिफाई करना चाहिए करंट वैल्यूज पे. फिस्कर्टन कैन नहीं नेगोशिएट द बैंक अंडर सराउंडिंग द. तो ये बस इन्होंने लास्ट के पॉइंट्स ऐसे ही लिखे हुए हैं कि इफ फिस्कर्टन कैन रीनेगोशिएट विद द बैंक, मतलब अगर वो लोन के लिए फिर से एक बार रीनेगोशिएट कर पाते हैं तो उस टाइम पे क्या होगा. बैंक देन द अनसर्टनिटी सराउंडिंग द एबिलिटी टू कंटिन्यू द ट्रेड मस्ट नॉट बी डिस्क्लोज. नाइस. अभी नेक्स्ट पे जाते हैं. सेल्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट आता है. In accordance with IFRS 15, revenue from contracts with customers discuss whether revenue arising from sales contract should be recognized on stage of completion basis. Fiskerton has entered into sales contract for the construction of an asset with the customer, whereby customer pays an initial deposit. The deposit is refundable only if Fiskerton fails to complete the construction of the asset. The remainder is payable on delivery of the asset if the customer defaults on the contract prior to completion. There is payable if the customer defaults on the contract prior to completion. फिस्कर्टन हैज द राइट टू रिटेन द डिपॉजिट. मतलब अगर वो चीज कस्टमर स्टॉप करता है, अगर कस्टमर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट को आगे कंटिन्यू नहीं करता तो अपना वो डिपॉजिट बन जाता है. लेकिन अगर हम वो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट कंप्लीट नहीं कर पाते तो हमको वो डिपॉजिट रिफंड करना पड़ेगा. रिमाइंडर इज पेबल ऑन द डिलीवरी ऑफ द एसेट. ठीक है. जो बाकी का अमाउंट है जब हम लोग कंप्लीट कर देंगे तो तब अब अपने को मिलेगा, विच इज ऑल्सो फाइन. The managing director believes that as completion of the asset is performed over time, as the completion of the asset is performed over time, revenue should be recognized accordingly. He has persuaded the accountant to include the deposit and the percentage of remaining balance of construction work in revenue to date. Okay. So, according to FIS 15, revenue from contracts with customers, revenue should be recognized when the control has been passed on to the customer. Control can be defined as an ability to direct the use of the asset. Uh, in the current scenario, we can see that Fiskerton entered into a sales contract for construction of an asset with a customer, in which the customer had already paid the initial deposit to the to Fiskerton. However, this deposit is refundable if Fiskerton fails to complete the construction of the asset. Or okay, Fiskerton if fails to complete the construction of the asset. That means this initial deposit cannot be shown as a revenue until the construction has been completed or the customer has defaulted on the contract prior to the completion. And the remainder amount will be payable on the delivery of the asset. Thus, this revenue thus the amount which is said to be the remainder cannot be recognized until the asset has been delivered and the control has been passed on to the customer. Even the deposit which the Fiskerton has received will only be recognized when the delivery of the goods has been passed on to the customer or the control has been passed on to the customer. Till that time, this deposit will be shown as a contract liability or deferred liability. हाँ, deferred liability बोल सकता हूँ. Thus, the managing director should not complete. I think thus, according to the managing director, the revenue should not be recognized until the completion of the asset has been performed and the customer has got the goods, or the customer himself or herself have defaulted on the contract prior to completion. बस इतना बोल देंगे. 4 मार्क के लिए आई थिंक इतना काफी है यार. और कितना? Revenue. According to FS 15, contracts with customers, revenue from contracts with customers, and at the inception of the contract, Fiskerton must determine whether its promise to construct the asset is performance obligation satisfied over time. During the production of the asset, Fiskerton only has the rights to the initial deposit and has no enforceable rights to the remaining balance as the construction takes place. Therefore, Fiskerton would not be able to receive payment for work performed today. Will not be able to receive even. As such, the revenue should be recognized over time, but at the point in time when the control passes on to the customers. It will go most likely on the delivery of the asset to the customer. Perfect. Do not simply, इनका खाली ये tutorial note देखो. Do not simply recite the 5 steps of revenue recognition model. A lot of this is irrelevant to the answering the question. The requirement asks you about the timing of revenue recognition. So only the fifth step is required. Make sure that you know the criteria of recognizing revenue over time. Nice. Next आता है. Explain any ethical issues which may arise for the managing director and accountant for each of the scenarios. The directors have a ethical responsibility of providing a faithful representation of the or a fair representation of the financial statements to the investors and the potential investors in order to help them make their decision about investing funds in the company or not. In the current scenario, we can see that a bank loan had a covenant attached whereby it was immediately repayable should the gearing ratio of Fisker exceed 50%. Uh, thus, thus the thus Fiskerton company already had a pressure of not exceeding the 50%, not exceeding the gearing ratio, because of which the chances of them manipulating the financial statements in order to have a gearing ratio below 50% is higher. This is also because Fiskerton had a negative cash balance as at 30th of September 18, and if the covenant had been breached, then it would have been repayable immediately, with which would have put in pressure on their cash balance and would have raised questions on them being a going concern. If that serious है तो हम ब्रैकेट में डाल देंगे. So therefore, by looking at the two scenarios, we can see that in one, and then in the case of Halam property, the directors tried to revalue the property at a higher rate so that the other components of equity would increase and thus leading to a lower gearing. The managing director argued that the fair values were referenced to the active market. फिर अपन वही ऊपर के points को copy paste करेंगे कि the management's the managing director's argument was invalid because blah blah blah. Next one, and is refusing to adjust the financial statements even though he knows it is contrary to the internet. Even the managing director knew that it was contrary to the international accounting standards. Still, he was refusing to adjust the financial statements, which itself determines that the managing director was trying to manipulate the financial statements, and this raises questions on his integrity and objectivity towards the investors. The directors of the company and the accountants of the company should adhere to the 5 basic principles, which are integrity, objectivity, then the other professional competence and due care, professional behavior, and confidentiality. Sales contract. In the case of sales contract, when the customer had already paid for the initial deposit, the managing director should not have recognized the entire amount, and but still he persuaded the accountant to include the initial deposit and the percentage of remaining balance of construction work to in the revenue date. When still the remaining balance of construction work was not yet completed. By looking at the concern, we can also see that he was trying to persuade the accountant by thus creating an intimidation threat over the accountant, or trying to lure him into a self-interest, into his own self-interest by offering him certain perquisites, ये अपन बोल सकते हैं. Um, Thus, this raises several ethical issues on part of the managing director. Um, he should be he should be told नहीं बोलना चाहता मैं. He should be he should be made remembered about his basic principles and or his ethical duties towards the company as a whole. ये अपन बोल सकते हैं. अभी चेक करते हैं उन्होंने कैसे बोला है इस चीज को. It is concerning that the property has been incorrectly classified as an investment property. अच्छा, बाय द वे अपन जो एंड करेंगे वो अपना स्टैंडर्ड तरीके से एंड करेंगे कि वो रेजिग्नेशन, एसीसी है, हेल्पलाइन, अदर डेट्स के साथ बात करना वगैरह. It is concerning that the property has been incorrectly classified as an investment property. Accountants have an ethical duty to be professionally competent and act with due care and attention. It is fundamental that financial statements comply with the accounting standards and principles which underpin them. This may be genuine mistake, but even so would not be one expected from the professionally qualified accountant. The financial statements must comply with the fair presentation principles embedded within IAS 1 presentation of financial statements. The managing director appears to be happy to manipulate the financial statements as the self-interest threat to objectivity arises from the issues over the debt covenants. It is likely that the managing director is concerned about his job security should the bank recall the debt and deem Fiskerton to no longer be a going concern. It appears highly likely that the revaluation was implemented in the interim financial statements to try to maintain a satisfactory gearing ratio. Even more concerning that the managing director has deliberately overstated the valuation of the year-end financial statements, even though he is aware that he breaches the accounting standard. ये सब अपन ने बोला होता. Such deliberate manipulation is contrary to the ethical principles of integrity. ये सब भी बोला हुआ है. Professional behavior and objectivity. Uh, अपन प्रोफेशनल बिहेवियर ये वाला वर्ड भी डाल देंगे. इट appears that the managing director is trying to defraud the bank by misrepresenting the liquidity of the business to avoid repayment of the loan. अच्छा, अपन ये भी एक लाइन काफी अच्छी बोल सकते हैं कि द मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर इज ट्राइंग टू एक्ट इन द बेस्ट इंटरेस्ट ऑफ द कंपनी, बट दिस शुड नॉट बी एट द कॉस्ट ऑफ मैनिपुलेटिंग द फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स. क्योंकि बंदा एक्चुअली काम तो कंपनी को ज्यादा लोन ना पे करना पड़े इसलिए करना है ना. बट दिस कैन ऑल्सो बी टू सेव हिज ओन जॉब. कि अगर गोइंग कंसर्न मतलब बंद हो गई कंपनी तो उसकी खुद की जॉब भी जा सकती है. लाइक वो भी अपन एक पॉइंट डाल सकते हैं. Sales contract is further evidence that the managing director may be attempting to manipulate the financial statements. The proposed treatment will overstate both revenue and assets, which would improve the gearing ratio. The governance issue arises from the behavior of the managing director. It is important that no one individual is too powerful and domineering in running, मतलब dominating actually in running the entity's affairs. An intimidation threat arises from the managing director pressuring the accountant to overstate revenue from the contract. It was also the managing director who implemented the excessive revaluations on the property. It would appear that the managing director is exercising too much power over the financial statements. The accountant must not be influenced by the behavior of the managing director and should produce financial statements which are transparent and free from bias. Instead, managing director should be reminded of his ethical responsibility. जो मैंने बोला should be remembered बोला था मैंने, but should be reminded is a word. To be reminded of their ethical responsibilities, the accountant may need to consider the professional advice should the managing director refuse to correct the financial statements. ये सारा पॉइंट्स एक्चुअली अपन ने काफी हद तक सब बोल ही दिए थे. हम्म. ठीक है. नाइस.